Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, allow your body to settle, your breath to deepen, and your mind to drift gently toward the past. We are taking a quiet walk through one of history's more shadowed corridors, not to thrill or disturb, but to explore with measured steps and gentle insight. Many were suffering from what today we might recognize as mental illness, but others were simply poor, unmarried, rebellious, or merely inconvenient. Victorian asylums, those sprawling, cold institutions tucked into hillsides and city edges, housed thousands of people in the 19th century. The title may sound foreboding, why you wouldn't survive being a patient in a Victorian asylum. But rest assured, tonight's journey is soft-spoken and steady. We will step slowly through the echoing halls of daily asylum life. Listen in on the life story of a woman who challenged the system. Examine the curious architecture and beliefs that shaped the very idea of madness, and peek into the polished world of the people who ran these institutions. And now, with the dim glow of gaslight flickering gently on tiled walls, let us begin. In 1840, a New York physician named Thomas Story Kirkbride published his influential treatise on the construction, organization, and management of hospitals for the insane. In it, he proposed a blueprint for mental hospitals, both grand and imposing, yet regimented and restrictive. In England, at Hanworth Asylum, at Cane Hill, Colney Hatch, a new model mental hospital has been adopted. Then the doctor's examination, invasive, mechanical, and finally, the blessed oblivion of medication. Your husband, your family, your friends, they don't want you anymore. They say you're mad, say you need help. It is 6 o'clock in the morning, time for washing milk sometimes, if they have it. If they have it, they also have bread. The patients line up again, take a crust of bread wrapped in a napkin and return to their beds. Some are set to scrubbing floors or making furniture. You are a woman, so you stay in the laundry room. She tells you it's time for lunch. The men and women return from their labors, file into the dining room and sit down. There is grass here, a patch of dirt and a pump for drinking water. One of the matrons throws a ball into the air and calls for a game of catch. Only one of the women plays. The rest stand in a circle, hugging the wall, watching the ball soar. Here an attendant reads aloud from the Bible, sometimes the newspaper. Tonight, the attendant reads about Lincoln's assassination. 1, 2, 3, 4. You count the seconds between breaths. Sometimes there is singing in the night, sometimes screams. Tonight, there is only silence. The room is suffocating. You get up and walk to the window. Beyond the pane, a barred rectangle of sky. The moon, a silver sickle in the dark. He finishes the story without comment, puts down the paper and tells you all to stand. You stand while he dismisses you to your beds. Thank you for playing, and let us know which part you choose in the comments below. They check the beds, pat the covers, peer into the darkness under the sheets. Their presence is reassuring. In a world turned upside down, it is comforting to know that there are rules, that someone watches over you, keeping the darkness at bay. When the game is over, the women return to their wards. One of the matrons leads you to a table littered with scraps of fabric. She shows you how to thread a needle and sew a button onto a sleeve. You are to make repairs on the asylum uniforms. You drift off to sleep and dream of wide open spaces, of trees, of birds. You dream of your mother cradling you, rocking you, telling you everything will be all right. You wake with a start. It's too quiet to still wear the rules. Where is safety? You throw the covers off, climb out of bed and pad softly to the door. You press your ear to the cold wood. Can't hear a thing. Lunch might be a bit of boiled beef or suet pudding. You eat it quickly because you know they will tell you off if you linger. You fly back to your bed, yank the covers over your head, listen to the commotion in the hall. What if it's what if they're fighting? You burrow deeper under the covers, wait, more commotion outside your door. Someone is banging on it, pounding, screaming. You flinch. The door flies open and a man strides inside. His eyes are wild, his hair and beard unkempt, his shirt torn and bloody. The attendant grabs you by the shoulder, pulls you toward the door. Don't fight him. It's all right, you'll be safe with him. You go willingly later. You're told to prepare for visitors. You scrub the floors until they shine, dust the tables and chairs, straighten the pictures on the walls. The asylum doors close behind them. You hear the bolt slide into place. At 5, the bell rings for dinner. It is always gruel porridge, but tonight they bring crusts of bread. You wash down the thin soup with a mug of water, break your bread in silence. At 3 o'clock, the visitors arrive, a gaggle of smartly dressed men and women. They speak to the matron, inspect the gleaming floors and shiny windows, ask questions. They do not look at you. You hide in a pantry, hugging a broom, listening to their clipped tones. After lunch, there is recreation. With the other women, you stand at your assigned tub, drop your clothes into the scalding water and scrub them furiously with a washboard. The water runs red with dye, hands chapped and bleeding. You think about leaving, going home, seeing the sunlight on your skin. But the asylum has its hooks in you, anchoring you here with routines that never change. The quiet rustle of paper, the scrape of a chair leg, the dull thump of a fist against the table. The only sounds allowed. You eat in silence. No one speaks in the dining room or anywhere. In the asylum, Talking can be a privilege earned at the end of a good week. The scullery maid is waiting with a basin of cold water and a rough towel. You imagine the world outside the walls, your family sipping tea in the garden, your friends strolling down a busy street, laughing. Imagine yourself joining them, walking beside your husband, children skipping ahead of you. A dog barks in the distance. You wake from your reverie. The matrons are gathering the patients once more. It's time for labor. You know there will be no soap, so you wet your hand and scrub your face and neck, then your arms, then your chest. No one speaks. Everyone washes in silence. When it's over, you leave your basin on the counter and return to bed. You pull the sheet around you again, tuck it tightly. You try to sleep. They washed your hair in freezing cold water, cut it short, rubbed something fragrant into your scalp. They gather up the bed linen, shake it out and fold it. They arouse the patients, check their names off a list and tell them it's time for breakfast. The patients rise and shuffle to their feet. Some are naked. Most wear their coarse wool gowns. The matrons gather the patients together and march them down the hall, 2 by 2, to the dining room. Then gave you a rough woolen gown to wear and showed you to your room. 20 women lay in the room with you, most sleeping, some staring blankly ahead. The room smelled of sweat and sickness, and there was something dark and sticky on the mattress. You had pulled away the sheet to find it. Even here in Australia, they're turning ground at Ararat, at Beechworth, and at you. Now, as a patient, you know nothing of the plans made in your name, the debates and decisions about how best to treat the insane. You are not a subject in a social experiment. You are simply the insane. You have been here a week now, ever since your brother brought you. You remember sitting on the train, gripping the back of your seat as it rattled along the tracks, watching the countryside pass by in blurs of greens and browns. You remember looking up at the stark white walls of the asylum when you arrived, how they seemed to mock you, somehow accuse. You heard other patients mumbling as they were led inside, heard the thud of a fist against flesh. Remember the heavy oak doors closing behind you, shutting out the sounds of the outside world, sealing your fate. His plan called for large domed buildings surrounded by manicured lawns and lush gardens, light-filled halls with expansive views and comfortable furniture. But there was more to Kirkbride's design than met the eye. For every beautiful reception room there was a hidden padded cell. For every well-ventilated bedroom a set of straitjackets kept in reserve. Welcome to the asylum. It is the year 1870. For 30 years now, you've been hearing the booming voice of Thomas Kirkbride across the Atlantic. You recall being stripped naked. The searing humiliation of that. The cold creep of dread as you imagined how those hard, unseeing eyes would judge your body. You know why you are here, but your belly rumbles. Soon, the matrons appear. These women have a quick, brisk manner, sharp eyes and voices that cut through the room. Breakfast is porridge, thin gruel. You eat it from a chipped bowl, wash it down with a mug of water. After breakfast you wait, you watch the sun creep higher in the sky. Some of the men are taken away to work in the gardens. At noon, the bell rings, and the head matron appears. She is the most terrifying of all the women, her face lined, her eyes hard. The women are led into a yard enclosed by high walls. Time passes slowly. You count the threads moving in and out of the cloth, dream of the life you once lived. At 4, the visitors leave. Afterwards, the men and women are led to separate sitting rooms. You lock the doors, crawl into bed, tuck the rough linen tightly around you. You lie awake listening to the other patients breathing. At 9, the matrons make their rounds. You lie down again, stare at the peeling paint on the ceiling. Then you hear shouting, crashing, the scrape of metal and stone. If you wish, you may continue this story in part 2. Click the link on screen to begin your journey. A building wide and imposing yet austere recedes from the road behind tall iron gates and manicured lawns. It appears remote, cut off from the rest of the world. The nearest town is 4 miles away. But before that it was called something different, somewhere where insanity came to die, somewhere that became synonymous with fear, pain and death. Before there was Hannibal Lecter or Norman Bates, there was Danvers State Hospital. But the plan itself was based on the work of Dr. Thomas Story. On either side of the main entrance stood identical wings containing the male and female staff quarters. Each patient room had a window and access to natural light and fresh air. Brick and masonry, they are made of tough materials to withstand the worst of New England winters and the wrath of those inside. The hospital itself is a maze of long hallways and narrow stairwells. Doors are narrow and frame by frame, revealing glimpses into rooms that held unimaginable horrors. Things had changed since Kirkbride's vision of quiet halls and attentive staff. With no funds for upkeep, the hospitals fell into disrepair. Ivy reclaims stone steps. Life persists despite the decay. In the attic, rusted gurneys wait for patients who will never return. Down the hallway, hidden in plain sight, are scratches and markings left by patients desperate to communicate. What would you do if you found something terrible hiding in the shadows? Let me know your thoughts below. In the silence, you can almost hear their voices. I walked through the streets, stopping to admire the old houses. I visited the museum, where I learned more about the hospital's history. In a quiet moment, I wondered if the people who once walked these streets knew what horrors lurked around the bend. Did they ever hear screams echoing in the night? Did they ever see shadowy figures racing across the lawn? The question remains, what will become of this place? As the sun set, I drove away, the lights of Danvers flashing in my rearview mirror. All day I had felt their presence, the patients who had called this place home. Now I wondered if they had followed me, if they would haunt my dreams. Visitors come to explore and pay respects to those who've suffered here. History buffs come to capture photos. Urban explorers brave the dangers to see what remains. Over the years, the hospital has suffered vandalism, arson, and neglect. Plans for renovation have been proposed, but none have come to fruition. Is it possible to erase the demons that linger here? Or are these halls forever cursed? The number of patients dropped after new medications offered hope for treatment outside the hospital walls. Finally, in 1991, Danvers closed its doors for good. Some rooms are windowless, without ventilation, smelling faintly of sickness and despair. The art alone tells a story of the hospital, of lives interrupted, of families torn apart. How do you make a place like this livable again? While exploring these grounds, you'll notice a large cemetery in the distance. Here, more than 150 patients were laid to rest. Most of the bodies were exhumed and moved to other cemeteries, but some remain. Can you imagine being buried here, having your grave disturbed, then reburied in an unknown location? This would have been terrifying. The heavy doors are scarred and scratched, a testament to a tormented past. The acute and chronic wings were connected by the corridor, which ran the entire length of the hospital. Patients were allowed to roam the grounds during the day, tend to gardens, or sit on benches while attendants monitored them. After dark, patients were locked in. Those displaying violent behavior were sent to seclusion rooms until treatment was controversial. Insulin therapy, lobotomies, electroconvulsive therapy, all were performed here, as were countless experiments on unwilling subjects. Here, at the end of each day, the chronically ill would gather for evening chores, an activity they would repeat every day to help keep them occupied and their minds focused on a task. Convicted criminals serving time were sent here for observation. Later, they would be returned to prison to serve out their sentences. Many of these inmates suffered from schizophrenia, a disease that had only recently been classified and was poorly understood. In the 1850s, Dr. Kirkbride developed a reputation for successfully treating the insane. He advocated for humane treatment, proper nutrition, and cleanliness. When completed, the complex consisted of 2 acute wings, 1 chronic wing, a laundry, kitchen, powerhouse, chapel, workshops, an industrial arts building, a farm, and a superintendent's home. By 1890, the hospital population had grown to 648. A second hospital was needed, and in 1893, construction began on the familiar B wing. Most importantly, he insisted that buildings housing the insane be designed differently. His plan called for a central administrative core with 5 wings radiating outward. At maximum capacity, the hospital would house 650 patients. Opened in 1878, it was once a beacon of progressive thought, a shining example of how the mind could be healed. Now it stands abandoned, empty, its history erased, its future uncertain. But the stories within these walls remain. Here, down long drives lined with ancient trees, it feels much further. As you walk the halls, each floorboard creaks, each step echoes with a story. The hospital opened its doors to 34 patients on March 1878, but its history goes back further. The site was chosen in 1874 when Massachusetts lawmakers set aside 200 acres for the Commonwealth's first state hospital for the insane. Today it seems isolated, tucked away from the world. But in the 1870s, this location was ideal. Easy access to rail lines, water from the nearby Ipswich River, and room to grow. For this is no country estate and a private sanitarium. This is a state hospital, a place where hundreds of men and women have come to be cured. Well, at least that's the promise. For nearly 75 years, this place has been known as Transylvania State Hospital. When you visit Danvers State Hospital, the story is clear. You can feel it in your bones. The blueprints for the hospital were drawn up by the Boston architectural firm of Moore & Co. In the center stood the administration wing, which included the business office, dispensary, dining room, and library. But here in the acute wing, the most intense treatments took place. Today, the buildings stand largely unchanged, looming over the visitor. In the beginning, Danvers State Hospital operated much like Dr. Kirkbride envisioned. During World War II, Danvers became the go-to place for criminally insane patients. By the 1970s, the hospital had become overcrowded. Conditions were unsanitary and understaffed. Rumors swirled about inhumane treatment and horrific experiments. Today, the hospital is a crumbling monument to an era of forgotten practices. As you wander the grounds, look closely. Among the weeds and trash, flowers still bloom. Daffodils push through the cracks in the pavement. In the basement of the hospital, you'll find strange devices used during lobotomy. Today, the hospital is a shadow of its former self. Can you see yourself staying here? Would you want to spend a night alone in these halls? On my way home, I stopped by the small town nearby, Before I left, I visited the cemetery. Rows upon rows of white stones mark the graves of patients who never got a chance at life outside these walls. If you want to see more videos like this, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Asylums, both grand and grim, once stood across the landscape of 19th century America. Within their high walls and barred windows existed a world unto itself, a world of routines, treatments, and tragedies. But who really ran these institutions? Doctors, matrons, administrators, and attendants, they all lived and worked here. Some were earnest, curious, genuinely hopeful. Others were more cynical. Matron supervised the wards, enforced the rules, maintained the linen supply, checked patient hygiene, and reported unusual behavior. Bells rang to mark the hours, dictating the rhythms of life. Escapes were rare but problematic, casting the asylum in a poor light and putting a strain on resources. Aggressive patients could also cause issues, not just for the staff, but for the neighborhood. Rumors spread quickly, and a single incident could lead to calls for reform or even closure. Balancing these threats required constant vigilance. At 6 a.m. the morning bell roused staff and patients alike. Breakfast followed, then work or therapy sessions. They were a reflection of societal fears, prejudices, and evolving understandings of mental health. The individuals who ran these institutions, the doctors, matrons, administrators, and attendants, they didn't just confine the insane. They were integral to the functioning of a unique world defined by routine, rigid social structures, and the relentless pursuit of order. Their dedication, their struggles, and their quiet sacrifices shaped the lives of those both within and beyond the asylum walls. Dinner was served midday, supper in the evening. Lights out came at 10 p.m. for most, 11 for the staff. If you want to learn more about asylums, stay tuned for more content. Thanks for joining me today. Explore further, and I'll see you next time. And the superintendent likely retired later still. Paperwork and worry keeping him up. This timetable applied to all, creating a sense of shared struggle and sacrifice. There was little room for individuality. The staff, like the patients, were expected to conform to the asylum's rhythm. This extended to attire. For male staff, it was white aprons over dark suits. For women, starched, white dresses and caps. These weren't just for appearance sake. The garb signified their role, their subordination, and their uniformity. All were servants of the state, working for the greater good. However that was defined. Sundays brought change. Church services filling the air with hymns instead of routine. The clergy were present, offering solace or damnation, depending on the sermon. Patients were often, though not always, expected to attend. For the staff, it was a choice. The asylum was a microcosm, a society unto itself. Laws were observed, rituals followed, and roles were rigidly defined. There was little opportunity for advancement, but also little chance of scandal. Life here was predictable, stable, if monotonous. Politics, the bane of the superintendent's existence, intruded occasionally. Board meetings could be contentious, especially when funding or a controversial new treatment was up for discussion. Inspections were dreaded events. Government appointees scrutinizing every aspect of the institution. Reports from these visits could make or break the asylum's budget, and so the superintendent ensured everything was picture perfect during such times. He oversaw the landscaping, making sure the grass was cut and the flower beds were neat. He checked that the furniture was polished and the staff were impeccable. The goal, to project an image of order and efficiency. Attendants fed patients, dressed them, cleaned after them, and sometimes restrained them. Some were compassionate, patient, gentle. Others, hardened by the work, grew indifferent, or worse. Turnover was high. Training was minimal. Burnout was common. And yet, there were moments of quiet dignity, of a matron reading aloud to a group of women, or a gardener allowing a silent patient to tend a row of herbs. It was a thankless job, but necessary, and the asylum couldn't function without them. Their rounds included observation, note-taking, and administering treatment. Each patient was a case, a bundle of symptoms to be catalogued. They might note incoherent muttering, or delusional confidence, or persistent melancholy. Diagnosis was loose and treatment was Many physicians relied on instinct, and few therapies had measurable effect. Hydrotherapy, shock treatments, lobotomies, electroconvulsive therapy, insulin therapy, rest cures. They tried it all, charting the results, but never really knowing which approach would succeed. There were reports to file, schedules to maintain, and families to correspond with. What progress was being made? How much would treatment cost? Should the patient remain a permanent resident or could they return home? But also, they lived with distance. Their homes were on asylum grounds, often with gardens or private kitchens. Their children played near buildings that housed the insane, but rarely entered them. Their wives hosted teas and readings. Life outside continued, and in the evenings, some read patient notes as others read poetry. The human mind was their occupation, but also, at times, their burden. But their existence was far from ordinary. At the top of the hierarchy stood the superintendent. often a man of strong moral conviction and medical training, though the quality of that training varied widely. He was responsible for everything that occurred within the asylum's walls. He lived on site, typically in quarters above or beside the administrative wing. These weren't Spartan rooms, carpets underfoot, bookshelves stocked with medical volumes and scripture, a study where daily logs were kept and records meticulously reviewed, a sitting room where visiting dignitaries or board members might be received. Every morning began the same. He rose early, say at 6 a.m., and immediately delved into ward reports, accidents, incidents, improvements, then patient evaluations. Who needed his direct attention? Was the new arrival violent? Did a long-term patient require a change in treatment? And throughout the day, duties continued. Some days it was meeting with the staff, discussing a particularly stubborn case or outlining new procedures. Other days it was facing the music, complaints from patient relatives, censure from the board, questions from local officials. He, the superintendent, was the face of the institution, and his shoulders bore the weight of its reputation. Beyond the asylum walls, he was judged the calm in the storm. After all, the public demanded order and quiet. In exchange for their tax dollars, he delivered, and when the sun set, he retreated to his study, poring over ledgers, signing requisitions, adjusting the budget, hoping for an increase. His salary wasn't princely, but it was steady, respectable. There were pensions, too, and he knew his work was vital. In sickness and in health, he was vital. You already know about the patients, the ones confined within. But what about those who oversaw their care? The doctors, the matrons, the administrators. Well, let's say step back from the padded cells and straitjackets to explore the surprising lives of those who ran the asylums. These weren't just places for the insane. They were workplaces, residencies, and even careers. Doctors, matrons, superintendents, clergy, gardeners, cooks, and servants all had a role to play in the intricate dance of institutional life. Now, let us step through the staff corridor. Polished boots echo softly on the parquet floor. Gaslights glow dimly in the dusk. Behind closed doors, conversations are held in hushed tones, professional, detached, and deeply human. Welcome to the series, where we uncover the hidden stories behind the everyday aspects of history. Today, we shine a light on those who ran the asylums, the architects of confinement. Now, the asylum was not only home to patients, it was also a workplace. Beneath the superintendent was the physician, a critical link between theory and practice. Then there were the matrons and attendants, those who did the work of care. Women cared for women, men cared for men. That was the rule. But it wasn't just patients who were confined. Asylums were governed by strict schedules. Yet, despite this order, there were challenges. In the tapestry of 19th century American life, asylums played a significant role. If you enjoyed learning about these unsung heroes of confinement, consider giving this video a thumbs up. And now, as we step quietly back from the halls, the wards, the stories, let us pause for a moment of gentle reflection. The Victorian Asylum was not a singular place. It was a system, a structure, a symbol. It promised care and too often delivered containment. It was built with hope and too often fueled by misunderstanding. It housed the sick, the inconvenient, the rebellious, the grieving. And yet it was built not with malice, but with a yearning, however misguided, for healing. Today, the buildings are mostly empty. Their corridors are silent. The clocks have long stopped ticking. But their legacy lingers in the way we speak of mental health, the way we balance liberty and care, structure and compassion. And far from those gray walls, you might find yourself thankful for the softness of your sheets, the gentleness of the present, the rhythm of your own life is yours to set. Sleep well, dear listener, and may peace be the final thought as you drift softly into rest. As you lie now in the quiet of your own room, safe, warm,